The beer mug hit the wooden floor with such force it splintered into jagged fragments, the sound echoing through Murphy's roadhouse like a gunshot. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. The jukebox hummed to a halt between songs. Even the old ceiling fan seemed to pause in its lazy spin. Every eye in the bar snapped toward the source of the noise. Viper Jackson stood there, looming over a woman half his size. His massive hand clamped around the collar of her shirt, hauling her toward him as though she weighed nothing at all. The snake tattoo curling up his thick neck seemed alive in the amber light, twisting with each movement of his shoulders. His breath, hot with whiskey, filled the space between them. "You think you're something special?" His voice sliced through the silence, deep and sharp enough to draw blood. He tilted his head closer, the muscles in his jaw flexing. "I asked you a simple question, sweetheart. This bar pays protection, or this bar burns. Which one's it gonna be?" The woman didn't answer right away. Her dark eyes remained fixed on the scuffed floorboards, her posture small, deferential, like she was trying to fold herself out of existence. To the untrained eye, Elena Rodriguez looked like a woman born to submit. 5'4" in worn sneakers, her white server's shirt hanging loose on a frame built for endurance, not show. A simple ponytail pulled her black hair back from her face, making her look younger than her 35 years. Ordinary, forgettable, weak. But nothing in Murphy's Roadhouse was as ordinary as it appeared. Around the room, 10 men rose almost in unison, pushing chairs back with a slow scrape of wood on wood. Leather vests creaked as the Desert Vipers Motorcycle Club encircled the woman, closing ranks like a pack of predators. Their eyes gleamed with a mixture of anticipation and cruelty. Elena's head stayed low, her shoulders slumped. To anyone watching, she looked cornered, beaten before the fight even started. And yet, in exactly 15 minutes, the same Viper Jackson who held her now would be on his knees, begging for forgiveness. The tension inside Murphy's hadn't arrived with the shattering glass. It had been simmering from the moment the Desert Vipers roared into the parking lot 20 minutes earlier. Their Harleys thundered down the two-lane highway, pipes snarling like jungle cats, engines rattling the thin walls of the bar before they even set foot inside. Locals had stiffened at the sound. Everyone in these parts had heard of the Vipers. 3 bars had already mysteriously gone up in flames in the last month. Owners who had refused protection money, people whispered. 2 proprietors had landed in the hospital, insisting their injuries were accidents, though no one believed it. Elena had noticed them, of course. She noticed everything. She'd been folding napkins at the service station when the first rumble reached her ears. Each fold had been precise, each triangle identical, as though she were preparing for inspection rather than setting tables in a dusty roadside bar. Jake, the bartender, had noticed too, though not with her composure. He was only 25, quick with a joke on most nights, but his hands shook as soon as he glimpsed the skull patches sewn onto black leather. "That's them," he whispered, sweat breaking out on his forehead. "The Desert Vipers. They're the ones who torched Rossetti's in Oceanside." Elena hadn't looked up. She continued her folding, unhurried, controlled. Napkins in a perfect line, stacked like origami soldiers. The door burst open, and in walked Viper Jackson. 6'3", shoulders like an ox, his head shaved clean and shining under the low amber bulbs. The snake tattoo began at his jawline and vanished beneath his vest, black ink crawling like a warning down into the dark. His arms spread wide as if he owned the air itself, swagger in every step. His crew fanned out behind him. Elena's eyes, though lowered, tracked their movements carefully. It wasn't just a drunken scatter, it was deliberate. They covered the exits, claimed corners, took control of sight lines. She recognized the formation. Intimidation dressed up as strategy. "Evening, folks," Viper announced, his tone falsely friendly, carrying the promise of violence beneath it. "Don't mind us. We're just here for a friendly drink and a little business." A dozen regulars shifted uneasily. Most were blue-collar men from nearby construction sites. Some were veterans stationed out of Camp Pendleton who'd made Murphy's their watering hole. Sheriff Tom Bradley sat in his usual corner booth, a steaming cup of black coffee in hand. At 55, Bradley carried himself like a man who'd seen more than his share of dust, blood, and desert heat. He lowered his cup slowly, his weathered hand settling near his hip. Off duty tonight, no weapon on his belt, but his presence alone carried authority. Elena had approached the Viper's table with her order pad, her eyes downcast, voice quiet. "What can I get you, gentlemen?" That was when the first spark of trouble flickered. A wiry biker with rotten teeth slapped her backside as she walked by. "How about you start with a smile, sweetheart? You look like somebody died." She stepped out of reach, the movement fluid, almost invisible. To anyone watching, it looked accidental. To anyone who knew, it was calculated. She didn't break stride, didn't acknowledge the insult, just kept writing down beer orders with calm, efficient strokes. Jake started to move, his young face flushed with anger. But Elena met his eyes, giving a barely perceptible shake of her head. "Stand down." She served their drinks swiftly, silently, her motions precise, like she was built of gears and levers instead of nerves and flesh. That was when Viper Jackson noticed her. Really noticed her. "Hey, server girl." His voice carried over the low rumble of conversation. "Where's Murphy? We need to discuss some business." Elena wiped down a table, cloth moving in perfect squares. "Mr. Murphy's in Phoenix this week. I'm just covering shifts." "Well then." Viper rose to his full height, shadow stretching long across the bar. "Guess you'll have to pass along a message. Tell Murphy the Desert Vipers are offering protection. $5,000 a month. That buys him peace of mind and no fires." "I'll let him know you stopped by," Elena said, still cleaning. Viper's grin vanished. His voice hardened. "I don't think you understand. This isn't optional. Every bar from here to San Diego is under our protection. The ones who don't pay, accidents happen. Gas leaks. Electrical fires." He flicked a lighter open and closed, the metallic snap echoing in the silence. Elena nodded softly. "I can't make decisions for Mr. Murphy. I just serve drinks." And yet, even as she spoke, her eyes had mapped the room. The biker by the jukebox favored his left knee. The two at the pool table were more interested in posturing than watching their surroundings. Sheriff Bradley had shifted ever so slightly in his seat, lining himself up for a better angle. And Viper was standing too close. Far too close. Overconfidence disguised as dominance. Elena's fingers brushed the chain beneath her shirt, touching the worn dog tag hidden there. A reminder of another life, another identity. One she had worked hard to bury. Trouble, however, had a way of finding her. By the time Viper's thick hand snatched her collar and pulled her in, Murphy's Roadhouse was already a powder keg. One wrong move and the whole place would erupt. Elena kept her eyes down, her breathing steady. To the bikers, she was just a frightened waitress cornered by predators. To the veterans in the room, though especially Sheriff Bradley, something else flickered beneath the surface. A coiled spring. A soldier's readiness. The silence stretched taut. The mug had shattered. The stage was set. And Murphy's Roadhouse was about to learn that Elena Rodriguez was far from ordinary. To anyone passing through Murphy's Roadhouse, Elena Rodriguez was just another waitress trying to get by. She worked double shifts without complaint, moved quietly between tables, and remembered everyone's drink order by heart. If you asked her regulars, they'd say she was dependable, polite, maybe a little distant. That was exactly how she wanted it. 6 months earlier, when she'd walked through the door looking for work, Murphy had taken her on without hesitation. A new waitress wasn't unusual in a roadside bar along the highway outside Camp Pendleton. People came and went all the time. Elena, however, stayed. Day after day, she tied on the same apron, wore the same loose shirts, and folded napkins with the same relentless precision. Jake, the young bartender, had noticed those habits right away. The way she arranged ketchup bottles and mustard in perfect alignment. The way she wiped down tables in tight, even squares. The way she never kept her back to the door for longer than a few seconds. He used to tease her about being OCD, but eventually he stopped. Something about her manner made him feel those quirks weren't quirks at all, but something learned, ingrained. Sheriff Tom Bradley had noticed too, though he'd said nothing. He was a man who'd spent enough time in uniform to recognize another soldier, even one out of it. The precision in her steps, the economy of her movements, the calm in her voice when situations started to spiral. It wasn't the way most civilians moved. But Elena kept her mask in place, day after day, until the Vipers walked through the door. Viper Jackson had made his entrance like a king claiming new territory, and his men had filled the bar like smoke creeping under a door. The tension in the air grew heavy, almost visible, but Elena kept working as though nothing was out of the ordinary. She took their orders, even when one of them grabbed at her. She served their beers with steady hands. When Jake bristled and started to step out from behind the bar, she stopped him with the smallest shake of her head. Don't interfere. If anyone else had been watching closely, they would have seen it. The way her eyes swept the room in seconds, mapping positions. The way her body subtly angled, so no one was behind her for long. The way her hand hovered near her apron pocket, not out of nervousness, but readiness. Still, to most, she looked like a small woman swallowed by danger she couldn't hope to fight. That illusion cracked when Viper decided polite intimidation wasn't enough. He stood, towering over her, his frame blotting out the light. $5,000 a month. That's the deal, he said, his lighter flicking open and closed like a predator's jaw. You tell Murphy, or things get unfortunate. Elena's voice was calm. I'll let him know you stopped by. Viper's grin twisted into a scowl. You don't get it, sweetheart. This isn't a request. His hand clamped around her arm, his fingers digging into muscle hard enough to bruise. That was when Sheriff Bradley's chair scraped back. The sheriff stood, slow but deliberate, voice steady as he spoke across the growing tension. I'm going to have to ask you to take your hand off the lady. Every head in the bar turned. A few of the regulars shifted in their seats, veterans by the look of their tattoos and pins. 5 men, at least, who weren't strangers to violence. The room tilted, the air thick with the expectation of a fight. Viper laughed without humor. He didn't release Elena. What are you going to do about it, old man? You're out of uniform, out of your jurisdiction, and outnumbered 10-1. Sit down before you get hurt. The sheriff didn't sit. Neither did the other patrons. A handful rose, quiet but firm, like soldiers standing to attention. The bar, normally a place of country songs and laughter, had become a battlefield without a single punch thrown. Elena glanced at the sheriff, her expression still serene. Tom, it's okay. These gentlemen were just leaving. But Viper wasn't leaving. Not yet. He yanked her closer, spittle flying as his voice dropped to a growl. You don't tell us when we leave. We leave when we damn well please. And maybe tonight we teach this place some respect. Jake's knuckles whitened around the baseball bat hidden behind the counter. The veterans in the room shifted, tense as coiled springs. The jukebox hummed with static, between songs but buzzing like a live wire. And Elena did nothing. She didn't resist, didn't flinch. Her breathing was even, her body slack. To anyone watching, she was a rabbit caught in a wolf's jaws. But Sheriff Bradley, who had seen his share of ambushes and firefights, caught the truth. The way her weight had shifted to the balls of her feet. The angle of her stance. The position of her hands, relaxed but ready. He knew what was coming before anyone else. You know what your problem is? Viper snarled, face inches from hers. You think you're too good for us. Too good to show some respect. His free hand grabbed the front of her shirt, twisting fabric into his fist. And then it tore. The sound of ripping cloth was sharp, final. White cotton split from collar to chest, falling open to reveal the black tank top she wore beneath. At first, it was nothing. Just torn fabric in a bar fight. Then people saw what the shirt had hidden. On her back, through the thin black material, was ink as intricate as it was unmistakable. The eagle globe and anchor of the United States Marine Corps. Beneath it, bold letters declared First Force Recon. And beneath that, her designation, Gunny Rodriguez, 0311. But the tattoo wasn't the whole story. There were scars, puckered marks of bullets, jagged lines from shrapnel, a long, pale slash cutting across her ribs, wounds that told stories of deserts and cities half a world away, wounds that told anyone who knew how to read them that this woman had lived through hell and come back standing. The bar went silent, truly silent. Even the jukebox seemed to stop. Sheriff Bradley's voice broke it first, low and reverent. Force recon. Half the veterans in the bar stiffened, eyes wide. Someone gasped. And for the first time that night, Viper Jackson didn't look so sure of himself. The mask Elena had worn for 6 quiet months had just been ripped away. The meek waitress everyone thought they knew was gone. In her place stood a Marine, a warrior, a survivor who had walked out of battles most wouldn't live through. And though she hadn't yet moved a muscle, every person in Murphy's Roadhouse felt the shift. The air changed. The pressure in the room changed. The Desert Vipers had come to remind Murphys who held the power on this stretch of highway. But now, it was clear power didn't belong to them. It belonged to the woman they had mistaken for ordinary. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The air felt dense, like the room had sunk a few feet underwater. Viper Jackson's fist still gripped the torn cotton, but the swagger in his shoulders had drained away. He stared at the tattoo through the thin, black tank top, as if it might blink and vanish. Sheriff Bradley was the first to find his voice. "Force recon," he said quietly, almost to himself. The words carried anyway. A few heads turned. A few backs straightened. Elena did not change her stance. She didn't throw a punch or square up. She simply let the quiet do its work. The bar learned something in that silence. It learned the difference between loud danger and the kind that keeps its own counsel. Viper blinked hard. Confusion wobbled into recognition. He let the torn shirt slide from his hand. It landed at their feet like a white flag someone had dropped by mistake. "How do you know my name?" he asked. His voice had lost some of its steel. Elena lifted her eyes and met his for the first time that night. "Stephen Jackson," she said, calm and even. "Dishonorably discharged 6 years ago for selling gear off the base. Started the Desert Vipers 3 years back. Wanted for questioning in arson and assault cases. Your lawyer buys you time. He won't buy you out." A few of Viper's men shifted. The wiry one with the bad teeth chewed his lip and looked at the door. The two by the pool table finally realized they had their backs to half the room. Elena did not raise her voice. She didn't have to. Every person there was listening. The corner booth scraped again. A gray-haired man in a plain jacket stood up, steady and careful. He had the posture of someone who had once lived by a different set of rules and still remembered each one. Elena had poured him coffee every Tuesday without knowing his name, only that he tipped in exact bills and always left the cup clean. "Gunny Rodriguez," he said, and the snap in his tone pulled eyes to him. "First Force Recon." Elena's chin dipped a fraction. "Sir." He nodded like a man measuring an old memory against the present. "Fallujah. Schoolhouse. You held it." "With help," Elena said. "Lance Corporal Williams. Private First Class Chun." She paused, just long enough to honor 2 boys who were gone. They didn't make it out. A woman at the bar pressed a palm to her mouth. The sheriff looked down at the floor. Viper looked lost. He knew he had stumbled into something he did not understand. One of the regulars, a line worker with a faded Marine Corps pin on his cap, stepped from his stool and stood by the door. Another man younger moved to the end of the bar near the hallway that led to the bathrooms and the back exit. They did not touch anyone. They did not block anyone with force. They only occupied space with a certain kind of certainty. Elena turned slightly so she could see the whole room. She did not crowd Viper. She gave him space, and with it, the truth of his options. "Mr. Jackson," she said, and that formality mattered. "You owe me for my shirt and for your hand on my arm. You owe this bar for the threats you brought into it." He swallowed. "We didn't know who you were." "That is not the point," she said. "You do not need to know someone's history to treat them with basic decency." The wiry biker glanced at Viper, then at the door again. "Vipe," he muttered, "let's bounce." No one moved to let them pass. Not rudely. just firmly. The veterans had set a quiet perimeter, without a word spoken. It looked casual. It wasn't. From behind the bar, Jake held the baseball bat low, the barrel nearly brushing the floor. His face was flushed, but his eyes were clear. Elena looked his way once and gave a small shake of her head. He eased the bat back out of sight. Viper tried to pull the old voice back on, the one he used in rooms where he had all the weight. It came out thinner than he liked. You think you can scare us off with a tattoo and some stories? Sit, Elena said. He flinched. He did not sit. Not yet. She let a breath out, slow and steady. Stephen, you brought 10 men to threaten one small bar. You surrounded a woman who never raised her voice to you. You set the terms. Now I set them. Here they are. You apologize to me. You apologize to the room. You walk out. And you leave this place alone. You leave the other places alone. You tell your people that you picked the wrong county. You do not come back. He stared at her like she had asked him to cut off his own hand. The room waited. A ceiling fan clicked as its chain tapped the metal stem. Behind Viper, a man with sergeant stripes tattooed on his forearm stepped forward 2 inches. He did not square up. He didn't need to. Start with the apology, he said softly. It will make the rest easier. Sheriff Bradley moved a half step toward Elena, not to shield her, but to stand next to her. Ms. Rodriguez, he said, keeping his eyes on Viper, if you want to press charges for assault and destruction of property, I will take statements tonight. There are witnesses. Elena's gaze stayed on Viper. No, she said. Not tonight. Tonight we teach a different lesson. Viper's jaw worked. Pride did battle with fear. He glanced at his men. They would follow him if he swung. They would also follow him if he left. He looked back at Elena. What he saw there was not rage. It was a line on the ground. On your knees, she said. He blinked. What? Kneel, she repeated, calm as the coastal fog. You put your hands on me. You threaten my people. You want to start clean, you start low. It is the only posture that fits. The word fell into him like a stone. There was a time in his life when he had learned how to respond to command. Muscle memory rose faster than his pride. He went down. The sound of his knees hitting the old planks was not loud, but it felt loud, like a hinge giving way on a door that had stuck for years. Viper bowed his head. He looked smaller in that position, human in a way he hadn't allowed himself to be for a long time. Say it, Elena said. He swallowed. I am sorry. His voice cracked. He cleared it. I am sorry for putting hands on you. I am sorry for threatening your place. I am sorry to everyone here. No one clapped. No one jeered. The room held the apology like a fragile dish that needed 2 hands. Elena nodded once. Stand. He stood, every motion careful, like he feared the floor might open. He kept his eyes down. You will spread the word, she said. Murphy's is off limits. So are Rossetti's and the places like it. If you call what you do protection, then protect ordinary people from men like you. If you cannot manage that, stay out of their way. He nodded. Yes, ma'am. The last word came out on instinct. He blinked at it, surprised to hear himself use it. Go, she said. And leave a cash envelope at the bar tomorrow for the shirt. Jake will count it. If it is short, I will know. It will not be short, he said quickly. He motioned to his crew. We are done. The veterans by the exits shifted just enough to clear a lane. The Vipers filed toward the door in a loose line that had none of their earlier confidence. The wiry one kept his eyes on the floor. The pair from the pool table avoided looking at anyone at all. At the threshold, Viper turned back. He looked at Elena and tried for a final piece of understanding. Why hide it? He asked. If you are what you are, why keep it secret? She picked up the ruined shirt and folded it once, then twice. Because real strength is quiet, she said. Because I wanted a life that did not need to announce itself. Because some days I am tired. He held her eyes for a second, then nodded and stepped into the night. The door swung shut behind him, and the engines in the lot started with less show than before. The room stayed silent. It was not the silence of fear anymore. It was the kind that follows a storm. Colonel Harrison, if that was who he was, walked to the bar with the care of a man who understood ceremonies. He set a few bills under his empty cup and looked at Elena. "Gunny," he said, not as command, but as respect. "You held the ground." "I did what was needed," she said. He inclined his head. "That is what we always did." Across the bar, the sheriff slipped his phone back into his pocket. "If they come back, they will find me first," he said. "But I do not think they will come back." "They will not," Elena said. She sounded certain. Jake let out a breath he had been holding for what felt like half an hour. "I thought we were about to have a riot," he said. "I am still shaking." "Go drink water," Elena said. "Then wipe the booths. The back corner first." He almost laughed. The normal instruction steadied him more than a hug would have. A few patrons started to talk again, in low tones. No one rushed her. They gave her the space to put herself back in order. She went behind the bar, set the folded shirt by the sink, and washed her hands. The simple ritual brought the world down to size. Sheriff Bradley touched the edge of the counter with 2 fingers. "You are sure you do not want to file a report?" he asked. "Not yet," she said. "Tonight they learn something that will travel faster than paperwork." He nodded. "Understood." Elena wiped the water from her hands and turned back to the room. She rolled her shoulders once and felt the old ache at her ribs. It was familiar. She could live with it. Music, someone called. Turned the music back on. Jake hit the button. The jukebox found a classic rock track and sent a guitar line across the room like a handshake. Elena picked up a tray and moved through the tables, taking orders as if this had been any other Friday. People spoke to her with care. She answered simply. She did not take bows. She did not invite pity. She let the bar knit itself back together, one refill at a time. Outside, the last Harley pulled away and darkness took the lot. Inside, Murphy's settled. The veterans kept their seats a little longer than usual. They did not want to leave yet. Not because they feared anything, because they had seen something they recognized and wanted to hold on to the feeling of being among their own. Elena crossed to the corner booth. The gray-haired man raised his cup. She topped it off. They said nothing more. They didn't need to. The mask had fallen. The truth had walked into the light and stood there without apology. She had not sought it. She had not wanted it. But now that it was out, the room understood her in a new way. Respect does not always require stories. Sometimes it only needs posture and a promise kept. Before the hour was out, Elena would stack clean glasses with the same careful hands she used for everything. She would straighten the condiments. She would check the door and the windows and the quiet routes to the back. Old habits, new peace. The night had started with a shattered mug. It ended with a bar that knew its guardian, and a woman who had chosen again to stand a post. The night after the Vipers left, Murphy's Roadhouse didn't settle back into easy laughter right away. The jukebox played, drinks flowed, but something lingered in the air. Patrons sat straighter, spoke softer. They kept sneaking glances at Elena, as though they were seeing her for the first time. She tried to act as if nothing had changed. Her tray balanced neatly on one palm. She wove between tables, refilling glasses and jotting down orders. She didn't invite questions. She didn't make a speech. She simply worked. But the weight of what had happened pressed against her shoulders as firmly as the strap of a rifle once had. Sheriff Bradley remained in his booth, nursing the same cold coffee. His eyes followed her, not with suspicion, but with recognition. He'd seen men and women wear masks like hers before, civilians who weren't really civilians, veterans who tried to blend into lives that no longer fit them. He had carried that same weight once, years ago. When she finally passed by, he leaned forward slightly. "Elena." His voice was low. "I should have stepped in sooner. I saw how they circled you. I knew something was off, but I let it play too long." She didn't pause in her work, only poured fresh coffee into his mug. "You did what you should have, Sheriff. You waited. You tried to de-escalate." Her eyes flicked to his weathered face. "Army, right? Iraq?" He gave a single nod. 2 tours. Just a grunt. "There's no such thing as just," she replied. "You stood your ground when it mattered. That's all anyone can ask." He didn't argue. He didn't need to. At the far end of the bar, the gray-haired man, Colonel Harrison, had become a quiet point of gravity. Men and women leaned toward him, whispering their own half-remembered stories. A few called him Sir out of habit. He never corrected them. Elena passed by with a tray of clean glasses. Harrison stopped her with a gentle hand on the counter. "Gunny," he said softly, "you asked why people treat you with that look, pity mixed with awe. It's because of nights like Fallujah. Because men like Williams and Chin never walked away. But you did. Folks don't know what to do with survival like that." Elena folded her towel in half, then in quarters. Her jaw tightened. They were the heroes. I was just the one too stubborn to die. A woman's voice carried from a nearby stool. Maria Santos, the florist from down the street, raised her glass. "That's not what I saw at Camp Leatherneck," she said. "You came in with burns over half your body. 3 bullet wounds. Shrapnel everywhere. Doctor said you'd never walk. But here you are, walking, working, living. You didn't survive by accident, Elena. You fought to come back." Elena stilled. She hadn't known Maria had been a Navy corpsman. She hadn't known anyone in town had glimpsed those years. "You're mistaken," Elena said at last. "Peace isn't something you win in a fight. It's something you protect. And sometimes the cost of protecting it is hiding." Her words didn't stop the ripple that moved through the room. Veterans who had never spoken about their scars began sharing small pieces with one another. A young man at the bar showed the faded ink of a unit tattoo. A trucker at a corner table admitted he still woke up choking on sand. Murphy's, a place once known only for cheap beer and Friday karaoke, was slowly turning into something else, an unspoken refuge. Later that night, a girl approached Elena. She couldn't have been older than 22, hair pulled back tight, posture rigid in a way Elena recognized instantly. The 1,000-yard stare in her eyes was a mirror Elena knew too well. "Ma'am," the girl said, hesitating. "I'm Lance Corporal Sarah Webb. Just got back from Afghanistan." She swallowed hard. "I heard what you said to that biker about not being able to go back to normal. I don't know how to do this. How do you just function?" Elena set down her tray, giving the young Marine her full attention. "You don't," she said quietly. "Not in the way you think. The person who left for deployment, that person doesn't come back. You build someone new from what's left. And you find mission. Doesn't have to look like the Corps. Could be small. Could be pouring coffee in a bar. Could be raising a family. The mission isn't the same, but the skills, the discipline, the loyalty, those stay. You just have to decide where to aim them." Webb's throat bobbed as she nodded. Her shoulders eased for the first time all night. "One day at a time?" she asked. "One day," Elena agreed. "One act of service at a time." As the hour grew late, most patrons drifted out, still murmuring about what they had seen. Elena stayed behind with Jake to clean up. He worked in silence for a while, then finally blurted out the question on his mind. "Do you regret it?" His voice cracked. "Them finding out who you are?" Elena stacked chairs on tables, the legs clattering lightly. "No. I've been hiding for 3 years, pretending the Marine in me didn't exist. But she does. She always has. Maybe it's time I stop pretending." Jake swallowed hard. "Will you stay at Murphy's?" She gave him a small smile. "Where else would I go? This is my post now. And Marines don't abandon their posts." The next morning, the parking lot was fuller than usual. Word had spread. Veterans from 3 counties rode in on bikes and in old pickups, crowding into the roadhouse just to shake Elena's hand or sit near her. She didn't make a show of it. She tied on her apron, brewed coffee, and carried trays the same way she always had. When someone thanked her for her service, she listened graciously, then steered the conversation back to them. Peace wasn't quiet anymore. It was noisy and crowded and messy. But it was hers, and she was going to defend it. The price of peace, Elena realized, wasn't hiding from the world. It was standing in it, holding ground again, not with a rifle, not with medals, but with presence. And Murphy's Roadhouse was quickly becoming the kind of ground worth holding. The weeks that followed felt different, not just for Elena, but for Murphy's Roadhouse itself. The bar had always been a way station, a place where truckers refueled with burgers, construction crews knocked back beers after long shifts, and Marines from nearby Camp Pendleton came for music and noise. But after that night, after Viper Jackson had been brought to his knees, Murphy's shifted into something more. It became a gathering ground. Veterans began showing up from towns Elena had never heard of. Some came in groups, some alone, all of them drawn by word of mouth. The barmaid who had once worn the insignia of Force Recon. They didn't come to gawk or demand stories. They came because they knew a place anchored by someone like her couldn't be just another bar. It had to be safe. Murphy himself noticed the change first. One Saturday afternoon, he pulled Elena aside during the lunch rush. "I've got 36 bikers in here, none of them wearing skull patches. All veterans, half of them from counties over. They're ordering meals like it's Thanksgiving." He gave her a searching look. "You know what that means, right?" Elena was wiping down a counter with her usual exacting strokes. "It means we need to order more ribs," she said simply. Murphy shook his head, though a smile tugged at his lips. "It means business is about to boom. And it's because of you." She didn't argue, but she didn't take the credit either. In her mind, she hadn't transformed Murphy's, she had simply stopped hiding. The rest had followed. By the second month, the walls began to change. Veterans brought in old photos, plaques, and flags. Someone donated a shelf of dog-eared history books. Another left behind a framed picture of their unit in Iraq. Murphy cleared a corner near the jukebox and called it the memory wall. It grew piece by piece into a collage of service and sacrifice. Elena contributed nothing at first. She served drinks and let others build their shrine. But then one afternoon a package arrived. No return address, just her name scrawled on the front. Inside lay a purple heart, polished until it shone, and a note in tidy handwriting. "Gunny Rodriguez, you left this behind at Leatherneck. Thought you might want it back. Corpsman Santos." Elena held the medal for a long time. It felt heavier, now, than it had the day it was pinned to her chest. Finally, she walked to the wall, found a bare space between a unit photo and a folded flag, and hung it carefully. Jake watched her, his expression solemn. "You're really part of it now," he said. She turned, her voice quiet but firm. "I always was." That night, Jake cornered her as they stacked chairs for closing. "I've been thinking about enlisting," he said, blurting it out as though afraid he'd lose his nerve. "Not just because of you, but, well, partly because of you. You make it seem like serving means something. Like it gives you a purpose." Jake nodded, chewing the thought over. She could see the weight of it in his eyes. Not long after, a local reporter stopped by, tipped off by whispers of the biker bar Marine. He asked for an interview. Elena declined. When he pressed, she told him the only thing she was willing to share. "Warriors don't need recognition," she said. "We serve. That's enough." The line ran in the paper anyway, and soon people began repeating it. It wasn't bravado, it was creed. 3 months after the confrontation, Elena found herself standing in front of the memory wall, staring at the photo someone had tracked down. 3 Marines in combat gear, filthy but smiling in front of a bullet-riddled schoolhouse in Fallujah. Williams, Chun, and her. She traced their faces with her eyes, remembering their voices, their laughter, the way Chun had insisted on carrying candy for the neighborhood kids. She remembered holding the line until her body nearly failed, and she remembered walking away when they didn't. Jake came up beside her. "You think they'd be proud?" he asked quietly. Elena didn't look away from the photo. "They'd tell me to quit overthinking and pour another round." They stood in silence for a moment. Then Elena said, "You know what I realized, Jake? Peace isn't something you hide in. It's something you guard. Out there, I guarded with a rifle. Here I guard with coffee and patience, and a place where people can breathe without explaining themselves. Either way, it's still a post." As the weeks turned into months, Murphy's Roadhouse shed its old skin. It wasn't just a bar anymore. It was a refuge, a place where veterans could sit with civilians without feeling like outsiders. A place where young Marines could ask hard questions and get honest answers. Elena still wore her server's shirt and still cleaned tables in perfect squares. But she no longer hunched her shoulders or tried to look smaller. She walked with a quiet confidence, the kind that said she had nothing left to prove. One night, as the last patrons filed out, she caught her reflection in the mirror behind the bar. For a long time, she had seen only fragments. The 18-year-old recruit full of fire, the scarred veteran trying to disappear, the waitress blending into the wallpaper. Now she saw something new. A woman forged in combat, tempered in survival, and reborn in service of a different kind. Not hiding, not running, still serving. The eagle, globe, and anchor inked across her back would never fade. Neither would the scars. She no longer wanted them to. They were reminders that peace had a price, and she was willing to pay it every day she poured a coffee, wiped down a table, or stood quietly between her patrons and whatever storm might come through the door. Murphy's Roadhouse would never be the same. Neither would she. Because Elena Rodriguez had found her mission again. And Marines never abandon their mission.